I'm not going to be as good at this as JT is at interviewing, but he's very good at all this editing and stuff, isn't he?
Yes,
But
he is.
I'm going to ask Tyler a few questions that people sent to our Facebook. But first, I'm going to do a little devotional on my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness, which I've been thinking about for the past week. We also had a devotional by Paul Tripp this morning on it, coincidentally. And he says, God lets us be weak to protect us from ourselves and from our pride, because otherwise we would think we could do it, think we had to do it, had to be perfect or righteous. And he allows us to be weak to cause us to value the strength that only he can give. So we turn to him. His grace is enough to cover you, to cover your shortcomings, your lack of accomplishments, money, groceries, your fear, and to cover the Rona. That's a new way to say it. All right, so I have 4 questions. One is from Adam from California. Hi, Adam. It's about prudent risk mitigation. The other one I'm combining it with is Anne from Norfolk. How are you keeping from bringing the virus into your home? Do you change clothes and shoes in the garage? And what if you walk the dog in the neighborhood? What do you do? Stay 20 feet from people? What about purchases? Is it reasonable to leave non-perishables in the car for 3 to 5 days and then consider them and the bags virus-free?
So let's start with how the virus is transmitted. So the virus is primarily transmitted from contact. The highest risk contact is with respiratory secretions. The spread of respiratory secretions is worst in a situation where someone sneezes. When you sneeze, you shoot droplets of mucus and saliva as far as 20 feet away. That's the reason for the recommendation about 6 feet spread for social distancing, is to minimize the probability that you get droplets if somebody is sneezing or has recently sneezed in your space. So the most important thing to do to avoid risk is stay away from people who are sneezing or coughing. The other scenarios are then someone who has sneezed or coughed or has secretions on their hand, touches another surface, and then you touch that same surface. Those risks are all much smaller than someone sneezing on you, but they continue to go on. And this virus can remain viable outside the body for a substantial amount of time, hours to, on certain surfaces, as much as a few days. Those risks are all much lower probability than the risk of someone sneezing or coughing on you. The last thing I'll mention with regard to Anne's question about changing your clothes, that's something that healthcare workers who are in a situation where they might be exposed up front really close to people that have coronavirus, they may need to consider those kind of things, because now their entire clothing can be contaminated. But for most of us that are out just living life around in a store or something like that, we don't need to take those kind of precautions. But some healthcare workers, that may be a prudent strategy for them.
When they bring my groceries, I take a wipe and I wipe where I think they touched. What do you think about that?
It's always fine to do those sorts of things. The most effective way to disrupt this particular virus is with soap and water, not so much with hand sanitizer or specific cleaners. Soap and water is the best disruptor for this particular virus.
Tom
Osterberg
has a very interesting question. He's 63. He argues that his medical age, based on a CHI test, says his medical age is 53. So is he safe?
One's particular risk at the end of the day is a combination of multiple variables, including your genetics as well as what other conditions one might have. So it's actually a combination of 2 factors. And it's impossible to predict for any particular person exactly what's going to happen with them. So the mortality does increase with age, but of course, healthy older people may do better than unhealthy younger people. It's hard to really tell the answer. So since I know Tom, and I know he's a reasonably healthy guy, he probably has a better than average risk profile for a 63-year-old person. But then there's this genetic component. Tom, not to freak you out, but none of us know what our genetic profiles are and what our genetic risk is. Therefore, any given person does have an element of risk.
That reminds me of my question for you. I read about a couple who were 30 years old. The wife got coronavirus and it was mild. Her husband got it from her. He had to go to the ER. It was really rough and he ends up dying. What is it in him that caused him to have it so much worse?
So you can never tell for two particular people. We just discussed that one risk factor is age, but another risk factor is underlying health conditions. In that news story, neither one had underlying health conditions. Then you have genetic susceptibilities, that some people will have genes that make them more or less susceptible to the infection. But in that particular case, my hypothesis is that the difference there is what we call the inoculum effect. The inoculum effect is you get more ill if you get a higher dose of virus when you are initially exposed. What often happens in families from many, many different viral infections is the first person in the family gets a mild case because they were exposed somewhere out in the community. They didn't get very much virus, so they have a mild case of whatever virus it is. But then the family gets a severe case because they're around the person. So instead of being out in the community, they've been living with that sick person, and they get a ton of virus. They get a big viral inoculum, and as a result, they get more serious disease.
Thanks for watching. Send in more questions if you want.